This is a Philips D8008 radio cassette recorder. But you might be wondering, where does it say Philips on it? Well, it used to say it on this door here, but it got broken off years ago. However, trust me, this radio was made by the same people who made this monitor 20 years later in 2007. And yes, this radio is from 1987. Let's take a look at it. Here it says the model number. You can remember the model number D8008 if you think about what the numbers 8008 say if you type it in an LCD calculator. Here there are switches for radio and tape. When it's set to tape, the radio can also be off. And the radio can tune into FM, medium wave, long wave and short wave. Medium wave is regular AM radio. The switches are actually missing. They look like this, and they just go there. I took them off because you have to do that to take it apart. We'll see the insides of this thing shortly. But there's the tuning dial, controls for the cassette player, the tuning indicator, and it supports stereo only on FM. Over here there's a headphone jack, and controls for mono or spatial, tone and volume. I think the mono to spatial control just makes it mono or stereo. I mean, it controls the stereo separation. The tone control, when it's all the way down, it makes it sound a bit muffled. And when it's all the way up, it has a lot of treble, so I think it's like a treble control, and the volume is obvious. These are the two stereo speakers. One of them is broken, of course, and there's the antenna, which is supposed to extend, but it's kind of broken there. On the back it says type D8008/30S, and you can barely see the Philips logo. And the mains plug. It just takes one of these typical cables. And it can also run on batteries. It runs on 6C batteries. I don't think this battery compartment was ever used, but the foam on here is still good. This radio is falling apart because I took off the screws, but we can still plug it in and demonstrate it for a little bit. The switch is set to radio, and I tuned it to my Raspberry Pi, which is transmitting a very small FM signal, and if I turn up the volume, you can hear the song I'm currently transmitting. It's a bit quiet. The speaker that still works, it can actually get quite loud, but for some reason it's being quiet right now. It got a bit louder now, but yeah, the radio works. And if we... oh, now it's even louder. Let's try other stations. There's a stereo one. And now the radio is loud. To take it apart, as I mentioned earlier, you have to remove the switches and the tuning dial. Of course, you should unplug it and remove all the screws you see on the back. There are no hidden ones. Oh, and I might as well show you on the bottom this caution warning, which is obvious, but it's better to have it in there anyway. Once all the switches and screws are removed, you just start removing it from the back, being careful not to unplug any cables, because if you rip any cables, you'll have to solder them back in. There's the power transformer, the antenna, and all the circuitry here, which I do not understand. There's a big capacitor there. And some other ones. There's a big chip here. When you first take it apart, it has these two plastic things on it. These are the switches. They attach here when the unit is all together. And there's one screw here and one in the middle. Same for the other plastic thing, which I've already removed. The screw in the middle is longer than the screw on the side. And then you just take these plastic things out. And you can move the switches here if you want. There's the tuning thing with a string. There's a screw here which holds the cassette mechanism. And a few other screws here which hold the handle. You can see the handle is a big plastic thing which holds all this circuitry here. There are also some screws on these circuit boards. You don't have to remove those if you don't want to look on the other side, which I don't. I don't want to break this any further. But once you got the screws for the plastic handle out and the cassette compartment, I haven't taken off that screw yet. Some screws like this one are pretty long. You can take the thing out and it's already falling apart, but now you can see the other side of the radio, including the speakers, which are 4 ohms 2 watts, and the cassette mechanism. There's the motor for the cassette. Here it has a date code, the 15th of December 1987. So this radio is probably from 1987. If we flip this over, we can see how it all works. There's the belt, which is still good, surprisingly. At first I thought the belt was the problem. You unscrew this screw here, which removes this thing that holds this gear in place, and you can take it off along with the belt. And herein lies the problem. You see those orange gears? You can see that some of the teeth are chipped off. I have no idea how it happened, but since those things are chipped off, it can't play anymore. Like, it can play for like a fraction of a second and then it just stalls. If I press the play button, which is here, the mechanism is ready to play. And if I move the play gear, you can see, I don't know which way is the right one, but whatever. When it reaches the broken thing, it no longer spins. These 2 gears are only for when you rewind, so those aren't that important, but this orange gear is the important one for playback and fast forwarding. If that's broken, the entire thing does not work properly. This thing here on the other side has gears which move this gear here, and it gets stuck when it meets the broken part. So if I don't find a replacement for that gear, at least that orange gear on the left, this thing cannot play proper cassette tapes anymore. Which is a shame, because otherwise this thing works pretty much perfectly. It's the only cassette recorder I have which could still play tapes fine. I have this old Sony Walkman which had a broken belt, but I could replace it. However, I didn't find a perfect replacement, so it doesn't play at the correct speed. And even though this radio is older than me, I've used it quite a lot in my childhood, in the early 2000s. Even though cassettes were already obsolete by then, I still liked messing around with them. However, I can still use my cassette adapter, because cassette adapters don't need moving parts. So if I press play, even though the things there are not moving, I can play a song on my phone which is plugged into the cassette adapter, and you can hear it.
judging by the way